Hey there, word nerds. Ready to geek out a little. Today, we're going deep, deep into English grammar.
Deeper than you probably ever thought you'd go.
Yeah, way beyond those sentence diagrams we all did back in school, right?
Definitely.
And to guide us on this journey, we've got the ultimate rule book, the Cambridge Grammar of the English Language.
I gotta admit, I was kind of intimidated when I first saw this thing.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's massive. And it was written by two, leading serious linguists, plus a whole team of other grammar experts, checked it and everything.
It's heavy-duty stuff.
It is, but you know what? As I started getting into it, it's actually fun. Who knew? What I find fascinating is it's not just about memorizing rules.
Right.
This deep dive, it's about uncovering the logic, the hidden logic behind how English really works.
Even when we break the rules. Right.
Exactly, even when we break them. And right off the bat, they tackle this idea of standard English, which is, well, it's not as simple as you might think.
Okay, yeah. Because when most people hear standard English, they think, oh, that's the right way to speak.
Right, right. But the book makes it very clear that standard English isn't about right or wrong. It's more, it's like a set of conventions. We all kind of agree on them.
Okay.
For clear communication.
Yeah.
Especially in formal settings,
So it's more like traffic laws. We all agreed to drive on the right side of the road, even though technically we could drive on the left.
Yeah, yeah. Good analogy. We agree on these conventions so things run smoothly. Yeah. But of course, language, unlike traffic, language changes.
Oh, constantly. Right. My grandma would never start a sentence with because, but nowadays I hear it all the time. It's everywhere.
And that's the thing. The book argues that grammar should reflect how people actually use the language.
Not just cling to those old rules, right?
Exactly. Not just those outdated rules. Take the example they give. They invited my partner and I to lunch.
Ooh, yeah. That one makes some people cringe, right?
It does. It does. But it's becoming more common and even accepted in some contexts.
So even standard English isn't set in stone.
No, it's more like...
It's like a river, always flowing.
A river, exactly. Always flowing and changing its course.
Okay, so that's the big picture, right? But to really understand how English works, we need to get into the nitty-gritty.
The building blocks.
Yeah, the building blocks. And one thing that I found fascinating in the book was this whole discussion of morphology.
Morphology.
I know, it sounds intimidating, but...
It's not that bad.
Break it down for me.
Think of it like looking under the hood of a car. Morphology is all about how words themselves are formed. It's like examining the parts, the pistons, the gears, all the little bits, and how they fit together to make the engine run.
Okay, so we're doing word surgery. We're taking words apart to see what makes them tick.
Precisely. And what's so cool is you can see how English has evolved by looking at its morphology. We've borrowed words from all sorts of languages like
Latin, Greek,
French, you name it. And we kind of mashed them all together, created this unique vocabulary.
So English is kind of like a Frankenstein's monster of a language, stitched together from different parts.
I like that. Exactly. And that's why it's so flexible, so expressive. But it can also be a little messy, unpredictable.
Which I guess is part of the charm, right?
Definitely part of the charm.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together, but let's talk about something that's always bugged me. This idea that spoken English is somehow lesser than written English. You're not supposed to use contractions or slang if you want to sound proper.
Ah, yes. The authors of the Cambridge Grammar, they tackle this head on.
Good.
They're very clear that spoken English is not inferior. It's just a different mode of communication with its own rules, its own rhythms. They actually even have a specific transcription system in the book to show how pronunciation varies between accents.
Oh, wow. So they're acknowledging that there's no one right way to speak English?
Not at all. It's all about how people actually use it in different regions, different contexts.
I like that. A much more inclusive view of grammar.
It's about embracing that diversity.
Yeah.
The richness of spoken language.
Okay, I'm loving this. It's like we're celebrating the fact that English is spoken in so many different ways around the world.
Exactly. Makes it all the more fascinating, right?
It does. Now, let's talk about something that's, fundamental to any language, meaning how do we actually convey what we mean when we speak or write?
Meaning, the heart of it all.
I admit I've never really thought about it on that level. It always just seemed like, words just mean what they mean.
Right, it seems straightforward. But this book delves into some fascinating concepts.
Yeah.
One of the key takeaways for me was this idea of implicature.
Implicature.
Yeah.
Okay. That word word sounds vaguely familiar.
Think of it this way. Sometimes what we mean goes beyond the literal definition of the words we're using.
Okay, like subtext.
Yes, like subtext. Reading between the lines, understanding those subtle cues.
So it's like when someone says, oh, that's an interesting outfit, but their tone implies they actually hate it.
Haha, exactly. And the book breaks it down into two types.
Mm-hmm.
Conventional and conversational implicature.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Conventional implicature, that's built into the words themselves.
Mm.
Like, if I say, she's a brilliant scientist, but TT, she's a terrible cook.
Okay, yeah.
That but implies a contrast. Her brilliance as a scientist contrasted with her lack of culinary skills.
So it's like a little flag waving in the sentence, signaling a shift in meaning.
Exactly, a flag. Now, conversational implicature, that's all about inferring meaning from the context of the conversation. Like if I ask, is it raining? And you say, I left my umbrella at home. You haven't literally answered my question, but...
And I can infer that it probably is raining.
Exactly. It's all about those unspoken assumptions, shared understandings.
Okay, so both types of implicature, they're working together to create a much richer tapestry of meaning, right? Going beyond just the dictionary definitions.
Precisely. A tapestry. It's a great way to put it. Now let's dive a bit deeper into the building blocks, those tiny words that we might not think much about.
Like what?
Well, one thing that surprised me in the book was this distinction they make between determiners and determinatives.
Determiners and determinatives. Honestly, I've never even thought about those little words before. They're just like grammatical glue, right?
They might seem insignificant, but they actually play a crucial role in shaping the meaning of noun phrases, you see. Determiners, they help us specify which noun we're talking about. And the book makes this point that some words can be both, a determiner and a determinative.
Wait, a word can wear two hats at the same time. Give me an example.
Sure, take the word any. Sometimes it stands alone, like, I don't have any.
Yeah.
But sometimes it acts as a determiner, like in any books you want. Same word, different roles depending on the context.
Okay, that's kind of cool. But why does it matter? What does this tell us about how English works?
It shows that even simple words can have hidden complexities, can function in unexpected ways. And the book actually dives into this fascinating nuance about how any is particularly sensitive to whether a sentence is assertive or non-assertive.
Hold on, back up. What do you mean by assertive versus non-assertive?
An assertive sentence, it states something as a fact. A non-assertive sentence is more tentative, questioning. For example, you often see any longer appearing in questions or conditional clauses, which aren't negative, but they're not making a definite statement either.
So even a tiny word like any can be a clue to the speaker's attitude or intention.
Exactly. And the book uses this as a jumping-off point to explore all sorts of nuances.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued by those little words I used to ignore. This deep dive is changing the way I think about grammar.
And we're just getting started.
Well, don't leave me hanging. What other grammatical treasures are waiting to be uncovered?
How about those action-packed words, the ones that drive our sentences, verbs? And let's go beyond just the basics of past, present, future tense.
Okay, I'm game. What's the verb revelation that blew your mind?
Well, I was fascinated by their discussion of quasi-modals.
Quasi-modal.
Yeah, they're like the rebels of the verb world.
Rebels with a grammatical cause. I'm listening.
They act almost like those helping verbs, you know, like can, should, would, but they don't quite fit the traditional definition.
You mean example?
A perfect example is be going to, when you're talking about future plans, like I'm going to visit my grandma next week.
Yeah.
It has that sense of possibility or intention that you get with modals,
Right.
but grammatically it's a little different.
So even verbs have their rule breakers.
Exactly. And understanding these subtle distinctions helps us appreciate the complexity of the English language.
I like it. Makes grammar feel more human somehow.
Exactly. Now let's move on to another interesting distinction the book makes, the difference between states and events.
Okay. States versus events. That sounds pretty straightforward. States are things that just RE, right? Like being happy, sad, in love. And events are things that happen, like a birthday party or a thunderstorm.
You're on the right track, but the book digs a bit deeper, introducing this concept of serial states.
Serial states. Okay, now you've officially piqued my curiosity.
It's all about how repeated actions can actually form a kind of overarching state.
Okay, I need an example.
Think about this sentence. She usually mows the lawn herself. Each act of mowing is an event, right? It has a beginning and an end.
Yeah, you mow, you're done.
But when you zoom out, look at the bigger picture, it creates a state of affairs. She's the designated lawnmower. even though the actual mowing only happens periodically.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like those individual events, when you repeat them over time, they become a pattern that defines a particular state.
Exactly. And the book is full of these subtle insights that make you rethink things you thought you already understood.
I'm loving this grammatical journey. Okay, what else did you uncover in this treasure trove of language?
Well, how about those tricky perfect tenses? They're often a source of confusion for English learners.
Oh, yeah. And native speakers, too. I still get tripped up on the difference between I have lived and I lived.
It's a common struggle. But the book, it breaks it down in a way I found really helpful. The basic idea is they show anteriority, meaning something happened before a specific point in time.
Okay, so events that occurred in the past but have some connection to the present?
Exactly. And here's the key distinction. They divide perfect tenses into two categories.
Yeah.
Continuative perfect and non-continuative perfect.
Okay, I'm all ears. Explain the difference.
Continuative perfect is when the action started in the past.
Yeah.
And continues into the present. Like, I have lived here for 5 years, you're still living there.
Right, it's a story that's still being written.
Exactly. Now, non-continuative perfect is when the action was completed in the past. Like, I have visited Paris, the visit is over, chapter closed.
So the difference is whether the action is ongoing or finished.
You got it. And understanding this can help you make more precise choices when using those tricky perfect tenses.
This is making me realize that grammar isn't just about rules, it's about understanding the subtle ways in which we express, like the nuances of time and experience.
That's precisely what this book does so well. It helps you see the world through the lens of language in a whole new way.
This is definitely a deep dive I'm glad I took. Okay, what else did you find fascinating in this grammatical treasure trove?
Let's tackle another tricky aspect of verbs,
Hmm.
the progressive aspect. That's all about those ening words.
Oh, yeah. I am running, she is singing, they're dancing. It usually implies something's happening right now, in the moment.
You're right. But the book points out this conflict that arises with punctual events.
Punctual event.
Those actions that happen in an instant, like nod, blink, or arrive.
So how can something that happens in a flash be in progress?
That's the paradox. But they use examples like the train was arriving to show how the progressive aspect can actually stretch a punctual event, create a sense of anticipation, an extended moment.
Oh, I see. So it's like we're slowing down time, zooming in on that brief moment of arrival and experiencing it in slow motion.
That's a great way to put it. It just goes to show that even the most basic grammatical concepts can have surprising depths.
Okay, my brain is officially doing backflips.
Hmm.
This is making me want to go back and reread everything I've ever written just to see how I've been using these grammatical tools all along.
That's the beauty of this book. It makes you look at language with fresh eyes. Appreciate the subtle choices we make as speakers and writers.
This deep dive is already changing the way I think about how I speak and write.
That's exactly what we're hoping for. Now, let's move on to something else. Those little words that pack a punch when it comes to expressing possibility, obligation, permission. We're talking modals.
You mean words like can, should, might, must, those ones?
Yeah, exactly. And the book offers some really intriguing insights about how those seemingly simple words can convey such subtle shades of meaning.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the modal revelation that surprised you?
One of the things that really stood out to me was this observation they make, that even the word will, when used for the future tense, it can convey varying levels of modality.
Australia will meet Sweden implies a prediction. Isn't that just how we usually talk about the future?
Think about it this way. If you say Australia meets Sweden in the final, it sounds like a done deal, like it's already set. But adding that will, it introduces a hint of uncertainty. The speaker is predicting the outcome, but acknowledging that other possibilities exist.
So even a word as seemingly definite as will can have shades of uncertainty built in.
Exactly. It's fascinating, right?
It is. And it just goes to show language is a much more nuanced and complex system than we often give it credit for.
It certainly is. Now, how about we talk pronouns? They seem pretty straightforward, but they can reveal some interesting things about how English categorizes the world, especially when it comes to gender.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the pronoun revelation?
Well, one thing the book addresses is this misconception that English has 3 genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter.
Right.
Instead, they argue that it's more about degrees of grammaticalization,
Degrees of grammaticalization.
meaning how rigidly gender is embedded in the language.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow. Can you give me an example?
Think about the difference between dog and Fido. Both can refer to a male dog. But using the proper noun, Fido, blocks the use of the neuter pronoun it. You wouldn't say Fido lost its bone, but you might say the dog lost its bone.
That's interesting. So using the name makes us think of the dog as an individual, and we automatically go for the gendered pronoun.
Exactly, which suggests that even in English, which is often considered relatively gender neutral, grammatical form can subtly influence our pronoun choices.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. Never thought about pronouns that way before.
There's always more to discover.
This deep dive is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about English grammar.
That's what we're hoping for.
Well, don't leave me hanging. What other linguistic treasures await us in this deep dive?
How about we explore those oddball words, the ones that always seem to come in pairs, plural-only nouns?
You mean like scissors or pants that always seem to be in cahoots?
Precisely. The book, it dives into the fascinating world of these plural-only nouns, which, like you said, either have no singular form, like cattle or clothes, or their scadular forms have completely different meanings.
Right, like glasses can refer to spectacles
Yeah.
or to just one drinking glass.
Exactly. It's like they're rebels against this whole idea of singular versus plural.
I like that. Rebels.
And the book even talks about words like mumps or mathematics that look like plurals but actually function as singular nouns.
Okay, this is making my head spin.
The point is, these plural-only nouns,
Yeah.
they demonstrate that even simple concepts in grammar, like singular and plural,
Mm-hmm.
can be surprisingly complex
And nuanced, right?
and nuanced. And understanding these quirks is all part of unlocking the intricacies of the English language.
It's like these odd plurals are reminding us that language is alive, always evolving.
It's not just a set of rules etched in stone.
Exactly. It's full of surprises. Keeps things interesting.
It does, it does. Now, how about we delve into the world of negation? How we say no in English. Might seem simple, but it can get pretty complex.
Negation, you mean like just saying no or using the word not? That doesn't seem too complicated.
You might be surprised. The book, it unveils some incredibly insightful points.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the negation revelation that blew your mind?
I was fascinated by this distinction they make between analytic negation and synthetic negation.
Analytic negation
Huh?
and synthetic negation. Those sound like terms from a chemistry lab.
Maybe so.
Mm.
But they actually describe two different ways of expressing no.
Okay.
Analytic negation, that's when you use dedicated negative words like not and no. Straightforward, no-nonsense denial.
I did not eat the cake.
Exactly. Synthetic negation, though, it's more subtle. It involves using words that serve other grammatical purposes but also happen to convey negation. Often involves prefixes or suffixes.
Okay, give me an example. I need a concrete image here.
Imagine someone saying, he disagreed with me. That little prefix, dis, is doing the work of negation, but it's woven into the verb itself.
So sometimes negation is like a neon sign flashing no, and sometimes it's more like a whisper.
That's a brilliant way to put it. And understanding this distinction, crucial for deeper understanding of how meaning is constructed.
Okay, I'm starting to see how negation, despite seeming simple, it actually operates on multiple levels. What else did you find intriguing about this?
Well, one thing that fascinated me was this idea of the scope of negation. It's about determining which part of the sentence's meaning is actually being negated.
Scope of negation. Okay, I need a little help visualizing this. Give me an example.
Let's take the sentence. Liz didn't delete the backup file. So by removing the negation, we can see the sentence is making three assertions.
Okay.
That a deletion happened, that Liz did it, and that the deleted thing was the backup file.
Right, so those are the three key elements of the sentence.
Exactly. And the negation could potentially apply to any of those three parts, creating different shades of meaning.
So it's like negation is a spotlight that can be pointed at different parts of a sentence, highlighting what isn't true.
I love that analogy, a spotlight. And the book goes even deeper, discussing how the focus of negation adds another layer of complexity. The focus is the most prominently negated part. For example, Liz didn't delete the backup file yesterday. The emphasis shifts to the time of the action.
So it implies she might have deleted it some other time, just not yesterday.
Exactly.
This is making me realize negation is far more intricate than I ever imagined.
It's like a linguistic puzzle, with hidden compartments, secret codes.
It is, and it's making me want to go back and reread everything I've ever written just to see how I've been using negation all along.
That's a fantastic idea. It's amazing what a closer look at grammar can do.
Okay, I'm hooked. What other grammatical mysteries did you unravel?
How about those situations where people say one thing, but mean something else entirely? Indirect speech acts.
You mean like when someone says, "Is that the phone ringing?" But they really mean answer the phone.
Exactly. Indirect speech acts are all about conveying messages that go beyond the literal meaning of the words. Instead of bluntly saying, open the window, you might say, would you mind opening the window?
So it's like we're playing a linguistic game, using words as our pawns to navigate social situations.
I like that. And the book, it delves into how we use indirect speech acts to convey politeness, persuasion, all sorts of subtle intentions.
This is making me realize how much we rely on those unspoken layers of meaning to communicate effectively.
It's like we're all fluent in a secret language of implication and inference. Isn't it fascinating?
It is, and the book does a great job of demystifying this secret language.
By explaining the structures, the contextual cues.
Okay, I'm ready to master the art of indirect speech acts. What other linguistic insights did you glean from this deep dive?
Well, let's shift our focus to those words that often get lumped together, but actually play distinct roles in shaping meaning. Prepositions and adverbs.
You mean those little words like on, in, over, quickly, happily?
Yeah.
The ones that tell us where, when, or how things happen.
Precisely. Traditional grammar, it tends to blur the lines, but the Cambridge grammar, it makes some important distinctions.
Okay, I'm ready to untangle this grammatical web. What's the key difference?
The most reliable way to tell them apart, according to the book, is to look at their complements.
Compliments. Remind me what those are again.
A complement, it's like a sidekick that helps complete the meaning of a word or phrase.
Okay.
For example, in the phrase, a book about grammar, the preposition about, it needs the noun phrase grammar to complete its meaning.
Got it. So how do complements help us distinguish between prepositions and adverbs?
The book points out that most prepositions need a complement to function, whereas adverbs, they can stand alone. So in the sentence, she ran quickly. Quickly is an adverb, modifying the verb ran, all by itself. But in she ran into the house, the preposition into needs that complement, the house.
I see. It's like. Prepositions are social butterflies, always needing a partner, while adverbs are happy flying solo.
I love that. Social butterflies and solo flyers. And the book goes into even more detail, highlighting how some prepositions can be transitive, taking an object, while others are intransitive, operating without an object.
Wow, this is making me realize that even these small words have a lot of hidden complexity.
They do. And understanding their functions, essential for a good grasp of English grammar.
Okay, I'm officially hooked on prepositions and adverbs.
What else? What else?
What other linguistic adventures await us?
How about those elements of the sentence that provide extra information, but aren't strictly necessary for the sentence to make sense?
Adjuncts.
Adjuncts, those are the ones that add details about the verb or the sentence as a whole.
Right.
Like she walked quickly to the store, or
Love
he
that.
finished the project early.
Exactly. And the book dedicates a significant portion to dissecting the world of adjuncts, revealing their subtle roles.
Okay, I'm ready to unravel the mysteries of adjuncts. What's the key takeaway here? One of the most important points the book makes is that adjuncts are far from just being decorative elements.
Okay.
They play a crucial role in conveying information about time, place, manner, purpose, condition, all sorts of things.
So they're like the spice rack of language, adding flavor to otherwise bland sentences.
That's a great way to put it. And the book provides a breakdown of the different types of adjuncts. There are domain adjuncts, which relate to specific areas of meaning, like spatial or temporal adjuncts that tell us about location or time. And then there are modal adjuncts, which express degrees of certainty, possibility, obligation.
It's making me realize adjuncts are like the unsung heroes of grammar, quietly working behind the scenes to enrich our communication.
They truly are. And mastering the nuances of adjuncts can elevate your writing, your speaking, allowing you to express yourself with greater precision.
Okay, I'm officially a fan of adjuncts. What else did you discover in your exploration?
Let's shift our attention to those elements that tell us about the direction or path of motion.
You mean words and phrases like to the store, from the library, up the stairs? Those ones that add a sense of movement.
Exactly. The book dives into the grammatical structures that convey this information, highlighting some surprising patterns.
Okay, I'm ready to navigate the grammatical terrain of motion. What's the key insight here?
One of the most intriguing points is that while English has dedicated markers for source, the starting point of motion, like from, it often omits the explicit goal marker to when indicating the destination.
So we're more likely to say she walked to the park than she walked from her house to the park.
Precisely. The book explains that this omission reflects a common tendency in English to favor efficiency, conciseness. We rely on context, shared understanding, to infer the destination, rather than stating it explicitly.
It's like we're taking a linguistic shortcut, relying on our mental maps to fill in the missing pieces. Exactly, a shortcut. And the book gives fascinating examples of how this principle plays out in various grammatical constructions. Yeah. Demonstrating that even seemingly missing elements can contribute to the meaning.
This is making me realize that English grammar is like a well-choreographed dance, with words moving gracefully, sometimes leaving subtle gaps that we instinctively fill in.
I love that analogy, a choreographed dance. In the book, it unveils that choreography, highlighting the patterns and principles.
Okay, I'm officially a grammar enthusiast. What other linguistic revelations did you discover?
How about we talk about space? Specifically, how English grammar expresses spatial extent.
Spatial extent.
It's all about how far something stretches or how much space it occupies.
Oh, okay. So like when we say the road stretched for miles or the house was enormous.
Exactly. And the book dives into the structures that convey this concept, highlighting some fascinating nuances.
Okay, I'm ready to explore the linguistic dimensions of space. What's the key takeaway here? One of the most insightful distinctions they make is between overall extent, which is the total distance covered, and terminal point extent, which is the distance defined by the starting and ending points of a movement.
So saying she walked 3 miles tells us the overall extent, but saying she walked from the library to the cafe, that gives us the terminal point extent.
Precisely. English uses different structures to convey these two types of extent, showcasing its precision when it comes to spatial relationships.
This is making me realize that even simple sentences about location and movement can pack a lot of information about where things are and how they relate to each other in space.
Remarkable, isn't it? And the book does a brilliant job of revealing these hidden layers of meaning, showing how words and phrases can convey complex spatial concepts with such accuracy.
Okay, I'm officially in awe of the power of language to express spatial relationships. What other linguistic gems did you unearth?
Well, let's talk about another fundamental concept, time. Specifically, how English grammar expresses temporal location.
So, pin. Okay, my head is spinning a little, but in a good way. It's like this deep dive is giving me a whole new understanding of how time works in language.
It is pretty amazing how much complexity is packed into those words and phrases, right?
Absolutely. But speaking of complexity, there's another aspect of time we haven't touched on yet, duration. You know, those words and phrases like for 3 hours or since last week that tell us how long something lasts.
Duration, a fascinating aspect of temporal meaning. And the book really gets into the structures that convey it.
Okay. I'm ready to measure the linguistic dimensions of time. What's the key insight here?
One of the most important things is this duration. It's closely linked to something called a spatial distinctions. It's about how we view the internal temporal structure of an event or a state.
A spatial distinctions, that sounds a bit like a mouthful. Is there a simpler way to understand it?
Sure, think about the difference between I was walking
Yeah.
and I walked.
Oh.
The first one, I was walking, suggests an ongoing action, like you're in the middle of a stroll. But the second one, I walked, implies a completed action, like you finished the walk.
Okay, I see the difference. One feels like it's stretched out in time, and the other feels like a single finished event.
Exactly. And the book explains that duration is tied to this difference between perfective aspect, which views an event as a complete whole, and imperfective aspect, which focuses on the phases or the ongoing nature.
So duration is not just about how much time something takes on a clock. It's about how we perceive and frame those events in our minds, whether we see them as completed or ongoing.
That's a brilliant insight, and the book gives fascinating examples of how duration plays out with these different spectral categories, revealing the subtle ways English grammar captures those nuances of how we experience time.
This is making me want to pay more attention to how I use verbs and those duration phrases. It's like a whole secret language of time.
That's one of the things I love about this book. It reveals the hidden depths of something we use every day.
Okay, I'm officially a duration devotee. What else did you find fascinating?
How about those situations where we use duration phrases to talk about events that happen over and over?
Okay, you have my attention.
The book points out that these bounding duration adjuncts, as they call them, are only admissible under certain conditions. It all depends on whether we're talking about a single continuous event or a series of repeated events.
Bounding duration adjuncts. Okay, that sounds pretty technical. Can you give me an example?
Sure, imagine the sentence, she spotted a hawk for a week. It sounds a bit strange, right?
Yeah, unless she has superpowered hawk, vision spotting a hawk is usually brief.
Exactly. So a duration phrase like for a week feels out of the place. But if we change the sentence to she woke up with a headache every morning for a week, now the duration adjunct makes sense. Waking up with a headache can happen repeatedly. It creates a sequence of events that can be bounded by a specific time frame.
Ah, I see the difference now. It's like those duration phrases need a container to fit into. It has to
Yeah.
be either a single continuous event or a series of events that stretch over a period of time.
That's a great way to put it. And the book really dives into those distinctions, showing how our understanding of events and states shapes how we use those phrases.
This is making me realize how much we take for granted when we use language. It's like we're secretly grammarians juggling these rules without realizing it.
That's a great thought, and this book brings that hidden grammarian to the surface.
Okay, what other temporal adventures await us?
Let's talk about frequency, specifically those words and phrases like always, sometimes, rarely, or twice a day, that tell us how often something happens.
Frequency, those are the words that set the tempo for our actions, right? Like a metronome.
I love that image, and the book delves into the grammatical structures of these expressions, highlighting the patterns.
Okay, I'm ready to decode the linguistic patterns of frequency. What's the key takeaway here?
One of the things that fascinated me was how these frequency expressions signal whether a clause describes a single event or a series of repeated events. So if I say she went for a run, it could be a one-time thing. But if I add every morning, it makes it clear that running is a regular habit.
Right, it changes the whole meaning.
The book explains that most frequency expressions, except for those indicating a single occurrence or zero occurrences, they inherently imply a multiple situation interpretation.
It's like those words are tiny time machines transporting us from a single moment to a recurring pattern of events.
That's a great way to think about it. The book gives fantastic examples of how these expressions interact with different verb tenses and aspects.
This is making me realize that frequency is a crucial part of how we make sense of time. And English grammar gives us a remarkable set of tools to express it all.
It's really incredible, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, what else did you find fascinating?
Well, let's switch gears for a moment and explore the world of degree. It's all about those words and phrases like very, extremely, slightly, or a little bit that modify adjectives and adverbs.
Degree, those are the words that tell us how much of a quality something has, right? Like, she's very tall, or he speaks English a little bit.
Exactly, and the book really dives deep into the structures and functions of those degree modifiers, revealing their roles and shaping meaning.
Okay, I'm ready to calibrate my linguistic scales of degree. What's the key takeaway here?
One of the most important points the book makes is that degree is tied to the concept of gradability.
Gradability.
It's the property of adjectives and adverbs that allows them to be modified by degree words.
So some adjectives and adverbs can be placed on a scale, right? Like tall can be modified to very tall or slightly tall.
Exactly. Gradable words denote qualities or characteristics that can exist in varying amounts. But some adjectives, like pregnant, are ungradable. You either are or you aren't. There's no in between.
So degree words are like the volume knobs of language, allowing us to amplify or diminish the intensity.
I love that analogy, and the book explores all sorts of fascinating intricacies about how those different types of degree modifiers work. There are words that express a lot of something, a moderate amount, or just a little bit, and they all interact with the meanings of adjectives and adverbs in subtle ways to create a whole spectrum.
This is making me realize that we use degree words all the time without even thinking about it. They're like the secret ingredients that add depth and flavor to our descriptions.
That's a great way to put it, and the book does a fantastic job of bringing those subtle nuances to light, showing how those little degree modifiers play a big role in how we perceive and describe the world around us.
Okay, I'm officially a degree devotee. What else did you discover?
Well, let's shift our attention to a fascinating aspect of grammar that reveals how we express purpose or intention. We're talking about purpose clauses.
Purpose clauses, you mean those why phrases that tell us the reason for doing something like, I went to the store to buy groceries, or she studied hard in order to pass the exam.
Exactly, and the book delves into the world of purpose clauses, revealing the diverse grammatical structures that convey that sense of intention or goal.
Okay, I'm ready to decode the linguistic blueprints of purpose. What's the key insight here?
The book highlights two main ways to express purpose in English, using finite clauses and non-finite clauses.
Okay, remind me, what's the difference between those two types of clauses again?
A finite clause has a subject and a fully conjugated verb. Think of those purpose clauses that start with so that or in order that, like, she left early so that she wouldn't miss the train.
Right, those are the ones that clearly spell out the reason.
Exactly.
Huh.
Now, non-finite clauses are a bit more streamlined. They lack a conjugated verb and often have an implied subject.
So those are the ones that often use infinitives like to, followed by a verb?
You got it. They can also express the purpose of the main action, like in he went to the library TO study. But sometimes they're more tightly integrated, almost like an adverbial phrase.
So it's like we have two different flavors of purpose clauses, each with its own unique taste and texture.
I love that analogy. And the book really delves into those subtle nuances of how these different types of purpose clauses add richness and expressiveness to our communication.
This is making me realize that purpose is at the heart of so much of what we do, and that English grammar gives us these elegant tools for expressing those intentions and goals.
It's really quite beautiful how language reflects our capacity for purposeful action, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay. What other grammatical adventures await us in this deep dive?
Let's explore those constructions that allow us to wander into the realm of what-if conditional clauses.
Ah, those if-then scenarios that allow us to explore all sorts of possibilities. I'm ready to venture into the land of hypotheticals.
The book provides a great overview of conditional clauses, and one of the key insights is that English distinguishes between two main types: open conditionals and remote conditionals.
Open versus remote. Okay, I need a little help unpacking those terms.
An open conditional entertains the possibility of the condition being true. It's like saying, if it rains tomorrow, we'll stay inside. The speaker sees it as a real possibility.
So it's like we're looking at a fork in the road considering both paths.
Exactly. Now, a remote conditional presents the condition as unlikely or counterfactual. It's like saying, if I had won the lottery, I would have bought a yacht.
Right, so it's venturing into the realm of what if, imagining scenarios that might not be very likely.
Precisely and grammatically remote conditionals often use a special form of the past tense called the subjunctive mood. It's a subtle way of signaling that we're dealing with a hypothetical situation.
So it's like open conditionals are grounded in reality, while remote conditionals allow our imaginations to run wild.
I love that way of putting it. And the book really delves into those subtle distinctions, showing how these different types of conditionals allow us to express a whole range of hypothetical scenarios, from the plausible to the purely imaginative.
This is making me realize that conditional clauses are not just about grammar rules, but about our capacity to think about different possibilities, to imagine alternative worlds, and explore the potential consequences of our actions.
That's a profound observation, and the book does a fantastic job of highlighting that connection between language and thought, showing how conditional clauses empower us to explore the boundless realm of what if.
Okay, I'm officially a conditional clause connoisseur. What else did you find fascinating?
Let's explore those sneaky little clauses that provide extra information about a noun relative clauses.
Relative clauses, those are the ones that often start with who, whom, whose, which, or that, right? Like, the book that I read was amazing.
You got it. And the book makes a key distinction between restrictive relative clauses and non-restrictive relative clauses. It's all about whether the clause is essential for identifying the noun.
Okay, I'm ready to solve this grammatical mystery. Give me some examples.
Let's start with the restrictive relative clause.
Yeah.
The student who got the highest score on the exam won a scholarship. That clause, who got the highest score on the exam, is essential for pinpointing which student we're talking about.
Right, without that clause, we wouldn't know which student won. It's like a detective narrowing down the suspects.
Exactly. Now let's look at a non-restrictive relative clause. My sister, WH, is a doctor, lives in California. That clause, who is a doctor, just adds extra information.
So the non-restrictive clause is more like a side comment, providing bonus information.
Precisely. And the book points out that these two types are often punctuated differently. Restrictive clauses are typically not set off by commas, while non-restrictive clauses are.
Ah, so punctuation can be a clue.
Exactly. And understanding the distinction can help you write more clearly, guiding your reader's interpretation.
This is making me realize there's so much more to grammar than memorizing rules. It's about understanding how language works, how those subtle choices shape meaning.
I couldn't agree more. The Cambridge grammar really opens your eyes.
It absolutely does. Okay. What other linguistic treasures await us?
Let's talk about how we quantify things in English. We're exploring those words and phrases that tell us how much or how many.
quantifiers, those are like some, many, a few, or a lot of, right? They give us a sense of the quantity.
You got it. And the book dives deep into the world of quantifiers, revealing their diverse forms and functions, and even highlighting some surprising quirks.
Okay, I'm ready to count the linguistic ways of quantification. What's the key takeaway here?
One of the most important points is that quantifiers in English are very picky about the type of noun they're quantifying.
What do you mean? Can't you just throw any quantifier at any noun?
Not quite. The book explains that different quantifiers are used with count nouns, which refer to things that can be counted individually, versus non-count nouns, which refer to things that can't be counted as separate units.
So count nouns are like apples, books, or cars, which we can easily count, and non-count nouns are like water, advice, or furniture, which are more like substances or concepts.
Exactly. And you have to use the right type of quantifier with each type. We can say many apples or a few books, but we wouldn't say many water or a few furniture.
Right, those phrases sound totally wrong. It's like the quantifiers have to fit the shape of the noun.
That's a great analogy.
Hmm.
And the book delves into those nuances of quantifier choice, showing how different quantifiers express varying levels of precision, approximation, or proportion.
This is making me realize that quantifiers are a crucial part of how we make sense of the world, allowing us to express those distinctions of how much or how many.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Absolutely, and the book does such a great job revealing those hidden complexities, showing how even seemingly simple words like some or many can carry so much information about how we perceive and measure the world.
Such true.
Okay, I'm officially a quantifier connoisseur. What else did you uncover?
Let's venture back into the world of negation and explore those sneaky situations where it pops up in unexpected places.
Negation hiding in plain sight. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
The book highlights those constructions where negation isn't expressed with a separate word like not or never. It's embedded within, in other words, or grammatical structures.
Embedded negation. Okay, I think I need an example.
Imagine the word unhappy. The prefix un is doing the work of negation, transforming the meaning of happy into its opposite. It's like a little negation ninja.
So it's like negation can be a stealthy operator working behind the scenes.
Exactly. And the book explains that this type of embedded negation is surprisingly common in English, often appearing in prefixes, suffixes, and even in the meanings of certain verbs and adjectives.
This is making me realize that negation is much more pervasive than I ever imagined. It's like a chameleon blending in.
I love that analogy, and the book does a brilliant job of revealing those hidden layers.
Okay, I'm officially on the lookout for those negation ninjas.
Yeah.
What else did you find fascinating?
Let's talk about a word that often causes headaches. Any.
Any. It seems like such a simple word, but I know it can be tricky. Sometimes it feels like it means some, and sometimes it feels like it means every. What's the deal with any?
That's a great question, and the book dedicates a whole section to unraveling the mysteries of any, particularly in negative and non-affirmative contexts.
Okay, I'm ready to unlock the secrets. What's the key takeaway?
One of the most important points is that any is not simply a synonym for some in negative sentences.
What does it really mean?
The book explains that any often conveys a sense of indifference or lack of restriction, especially in those negative contexts.
So when I say I don't have any money, it doesn't just mean $0. It means I'm lacking funds in a broader sense.
Exactly. It's about a general lack of something, not a specific quantity.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about those non-affirmative contexts you mentioned earlier? Those aren't technically negative, right?
That's right. Non-affirmative contexts include questions, conditional clauses, and certain other constructions where the speaker isn't making a definite statement.
So in a question like, did you see any birds in the park? The use of any suggests that the speaker is open to the possibility of seeing 0 birds, 1 bird, or many birds.
Precisely any in those contexts often conveys a sense of uncertainty or lack of commitment.
This is making me realize that even those simple words can have hidden depths of meaning.
And that's the beauty of language. There's always more to discover.
Okay, I'm officially an any aficionado. What else do you find fascinating?
Well, let's talk about those little words that often get overlooked but actually play a crucial role in shaping the meaning of nouns' determiners.
Determiners, you mean those words like the, a, this, that, my, your, and so on that come before a noun?
Exactly. And the book delves into the fascinating world of determiners, revealing their surprisingly diverse roles.
Okay, I'm ready to explore the linguistic landscape of determiners. What's the key takeaway here?
One of the most important points the book makes is that determiners are not just grammatical placeholders.
Okay.
They actually convey a wealth of information about the noun.
So they're like little signposts that guide us towards the right meaning.
I love that analogy determiners can tell us whether a noun is definite or indefinite, singular or plural, who possesses it, and even how much or how many there are. They're like tiny powerhouses of meaning packed into those little words.
This is making me realize that there's so much more to those little words than meets the eye. They're like the unsung heroes quietly working to shape meaning.
They really are, and the book does a fantastic job of revealing those hidden layers, showing how mastering those nuances can enhance our precision as communicators.
Okay, I'm officially a determiner devotee. What else did you find intriguing?
Let's talk about those words that defy easy categorization. Those instances where a single word takes on multiple grammatical roles. Simultaneously, we're talking about fused head constructions.
Fused head construction. Okay, that sounds a bit like a science fiction concept.
It might sound intimidating,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually quite simple. Imagine the sentence, I need some screws but can't find any. That word any is a fused head construction.
Okay, so
Well, it's acting as both the head of the noun phrase, similar to how screws functions in the first part, and D, it's acting as a determiner, specifying an unspecified quantity.
it's like Annie is wearing two hats at the same time.
That's a great way to visualize it, and the book provides numerous examples showing how they add efficiency and elegance to the English language.
This is making me realize that language is much more flexible than we often give it credit for.
I love that, and the Cambridge Grammar really celebrates that flexibility,
Yeah.
showing how language constantly evolves and adapts.
Okay, I'm officially a fused head fan. What else did you uncover?
Let's shift our focus to those words that give names to specific people, places, or things, proper names.
Proper names, those seem pretty straightforward. You just capitalize the first letter.
You might be surprised the book dives into some fascinating complexities.
Okay, I'm ready to explore the linguistic world of names. What's the key takeaway here?
One of the most insightful points the book makes is that proper names in English can be classified as either strong or weak.
Strong versus weak proper names? I've never thought about it that way before.
It's a fascinating distinction. Strong proper names like London, Emily, or Microsoft can stand alone. They have a built-in sense of definiteness.
Right, it would sound weird to add the.
Exactly. But weak proper names like the Thames, the Alps, or the United States need the.
So like those weak proper names need a little boost.
That's a great way to put it. And the book goes into the historical reasons behind this distinction, showing how it reflects the ways we use language to identify and categorize the world.
This is making me realize that even something as seemingly simple as a name can have hidden layers of complexity.
It's true. And the Cambridge Grammar does a brilliant job of revealing those subtle nuances.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued by the world of proper names. What else did you uncover in the Cambridge Grammar of the English language?
Let's shift our focus to those words that add color and description adjectives.
Adjectives, those are the words like beautiful, tall, blue, and delicious that tell us more about the qualities.
You got it. And the book provides a comprehensive overview of adjectives exploring their diverse forms, functions, and grammatical behaviors.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into the colorful world of adjectives. What's the key takeaway here?
One of the most important points the book makes is that adjectives can function in three main ways: attributively, predicatively, and postpositively.
Attributable, predicatively, postpositively. Those are some fancy grammar terms. Can you break it down for me?
Of course, attributive adjectives are the most common type. They come before the noun. They modify, as in a red car or a beautiful sunset.
Right, those are the ones we typically think of.
Exactly. Now, predicative adjectives come after a linking verb like be, seem, or become, think of sentences like the car is red or the sunset seems beautiful. They act like a complement to the verb.
So it's like attributive adjectives are directly attached while predicative adjectives are connected through a linking verb.
That's a great way to visualize it. And then we have those rare but valid postpositive adjectives. They come after the noun. Think of phrases like something wicked this way comes or the president-elect.
Postpositive adjectives, they sound kind of Shakespearean.
They do have a bit of a literary flair, but they're still part of the grammatical toolbox. And the book highlights the subtle differences between these positions, showing how they can create different effects.
This is making me realize that adjectives are much more versatile than I ever imagined.
They are, and they add so much depth to our language.
Okay, what else did you uncover in your exploration?
Well, let's talk about those tricky words that sometimes act like adjectives but aren't technically adjectives at all, attributive nouns.
Attributive nouns, those are nouns that function like adjectives, right? Like chicken soup or business meeting.
You got it. And the book does a deep dive into the world of attributive nouns, revealing their unique characteristics and their relationship with adjectives.
Okay, I'm ready to disentangle this grammatical puzzle. What's the key to understanding attributive nouns?
The key takeaway is that attributive nouns, while they share some similarities with adjectives in their modifying function, actually differ in several key ways.
So they're like those distant relatives who show up at family reunions, familiar but not quite the same.
I love that analogy, and the book highlights several key differences. For example, attributive nouns typically don't take those degree modifiers we were talking about earlier. You wouldn't say very chicken soup or extremely business meeting.
Right, that would sound totally bizarre.
Exactly. Plus, attributive nouns often behave more like nouns in other ways. For instance, you can pluralize them like in shoe store or bookshelf. You wouldn't do that with an adjective.
Ah, so they're like undercover agents who blend in.
That's a brilliant way to think about it, and the book does a fantastic job of revealing these subtle distinctions, showing how attributive nouns add a unique layer of complexity and expressiveness to the English language.
Okay, I'm officially an attributive noun aficionado. What else did you find intriguing?
Let's shift our focus to a grammatical concept that's all about comparison, the system of grade in adjectives and adverbs.
Grade, you mean those A and eist endings?
That's part of it. The book gives a comprehensive overview of how we express degrees of comparison, and it's more complex than just adding those suffixes.
Okay, I'm ready to climb the linguistic ladder of comparison. What's the key takeaway here?
One of the most important points the book makes is that the system of grade in English involves both inflectional marking and analytic marking.
Inflectional versus analytic marking. Can you break down those terms for me?
Absolutely. Inflectional marking involves changing the form of the adjective or adverb itself. We add for the comparative degree, as in taller or faster, and est for the superlative degree, as in tallest or fastest.
Right, those are the familiar suffixes.
Exactly. But with analytic marking, we use separate words to express comparison. Think of words like more or less for the comparative degree and most, or at least for the superlative degree.
So it's like inflectional marking is a built-in feature, while analytic marking is an external add-on.
That's a great way to think about it. And the book delves into the factors and determine which one we use, showing how this choice is influenced by the length of the word and its sound patterns.
This is making me realize that comparison is such a fundamental part of how we think and communicate, and English grammar has this amazingly flexible system for expressing it all.
It's fascinating how language reflects our capacity for nuanced thinking.
Absolutely. Okay, what other linguistic treasures did you unearth?
Let's talk about a grammatical category that's often a bit of a chameleon and participle, those verb forms that can also function as adjectives.
Participles, those are the ones that end in eng or ed, right? Like a running child or a broken window.
You got it. And the book dives into the fascinating ways participles make that transition, highlighting the subtle distinctions and sometimes blurry boundaries.
Okay, so we're talking about those ing and eddy boods that can be verbs sometimes and adjectives other times.
Exactly, and not all participles make that transition smoothly. Some are more verb-like, some are more adjective-like.
So like some are still in their workout clothes and others have dressed up for a fancy dinner.
Uh-huh, I like that image. The book gives us some tests to figure out if a participle is really acting like an adjective.
Okay.
For example, true adjectives love adverbs like very or too.
Right, very tired or too excited. That makes sense.
But try that with some participles.
Like very running.
Yeah, very running or too broken just sounds weird.
Those participles are still verbs at heart.
They are, and another test is those linking verbs like seem or become.
Okay.
He seems tired, that's fine, but he seems running. No way.
So it's all about whether the participle has really settled into its new adjective life or if it's still holding on to its verb roots.
Exactly, and the book really explores this, showing how participles can live in this in-between space.
This whole deep dive is making me see English grammar so differently. It's like a city with words constantly changing jobs and moving to different neighborhoods.
I love that a city of words and the Cambridge Grammar. It's like the ultimate city guide.
It is. Okay, so what other hidden corners of this city did we miss?
Well, how about those adjectives that just refuse to go before the noun?
You mean the ones that come after the noun?
Yes, those post-positive adjectives, the rebels of the adjective world.
Like things unseen or attorneys general.
You got it. And
Yeah.
they might seem unusual, but the book says they break the rules for a reason.
Okay, I'm ready to break some rules. Tell me why.
Sometimes it's just more natural, like court-martial or heir apparent.
Yeah, martial court just sounds wrong.
It does. And sometimes putting the adjective after the noun makes it stronger, More formal?
Like the problems inherent in the system.
Exactly. It sounds way more serious than the inherent problems.
It does. It's like the adjective is dropping the mic after a big statement.
Uh-huh. Exactly. And the book also points out that sometimes they create mystery suspense.
Ooh, give me an example.
The darkness palpable. That's way creepier than the palpable darkness.
It is. Those post-positive adjectives are kind of cool. They bring a little drama.
They do. They shake things up a bit.
This deep dive has been amazing. I'm seeing English grammar with new eyes now.
That's great to hear. And remember, this is just the beginning. The Cambridge Grammar has so much more to offer.
It does. I'm definitely inspired to keep learning. And to all our listeners out there, I hope you feel the same way.
Embrace your inner grammar geek.
Yeah.
There's a whole world of fascinating stuff out there.
Well, that's all for this deep dive into English grammar. We'll catch you next time for another linguistic adventure.